archive video down there as well. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to John Fields, who is our Senior Director of AEIVA.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Man, this is really, really amazing to see so many people here tonight. And I hope everyone is safe and staying home. So we have a really special guest tonight, artist Jessica Angel. I'm going to basically just kind of do a few things before we open it up to questions and the general discussion. I'm going to introduce Jessica, and then I have a brief PowerPoint slideshow of just sort of some of Jessica's work, and mostly focused on a project that she did at AEIVA a couple of years ago. So Jessica is a Colombian-born artist living and working in New York. And so she's broadcasting from her place. And are you in Brooklyn these days, Jessica? So.
Yes, I was muted.
Good. And so Jessica does typically these sort of large-scale installations that she does to sort of enable forms of collaboration amongst sciences, philosophy, music, art, and new media. I used to have a joke that I would say about you, Jessica, actually, that you often seemed way more, you were the artist we've shown who was the least interested in art, because most of your PowerPoint presentations always just had to do with science and philosophy, but it's also one of the things that really makes your work super interesting. Angel uses a variety of materials, including cut vinyl, paint, and wallpaper to transform architectural interiors by distorting the viewer's visual perspective. And so Christina and Jessica will talk a little bit later about her actual process, which is actually one of the coolest parts about Jessica's work, is like hearing how you arrived at the process and the use of the materials the materials that you specifically select. So I'm going to take over the screen now for a few minutes. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
So I started with this piece. This is one of Jessica Angel's pieces from maybe, when was this? 2014, 2015?
Yes, around. Mm-hmm.
And so I picked this piece to start with because this was kind of the piece that eventually led Jessica to AEIVA. And so AEIVA's founding director, Lisa Tamiris Becker, prior to coming to AEIVA, was the director of the art museum in it was in New Mexico, right? Which museum specifically was it? I'm sorry, I'm kind of spacing.
It's called 516 Arts.
Right. And so Lisa had commissioned Jessica to do a project. And it was one of the very first conversations Lisa and I had when she came to work at AEIVA, was that she sort of brought me in this magazine one morning and said, "You've got to see this artist, Jessica Angel, and I really want to do a project with her." I thought the work was really compelling. So we reached out to Jessica and decided, we knew that this would be one of the more ambitious projects we'd ever attempted, and we knew that we would sort of need support to get it off the ground. So we decided to bring Jessica to AEIVA just to give a lecture and sort of, expose people to her work and get a kind of read the temperature of if there would be interest in her work in Birmingham. And so she came out and gave a lecture, and everyone responded really positively. This project here, Jessica, do you remember, like, how long of a project was this one in particular?
It took 3 weeks to install this one. Okay. So everything you see in the background as QR code is this paper that is printed with toner, just printed, it's like blueprints material. Right.
And then everything else is on the floor is cut adhesive vinyl?
That's right. And then the white on the walls is just the negative space of the actual wall.
Okay. Cool. All right.
Yeah, that was interesting because we worked with a group of local artists, and that's something that I've been trying to do, is kind of immerse myself within the community and working with people from the city where I'm going, instead of just like bringing my own assistance, which may seem a little harder because then you have to go through the learning curve with everybody. but I think it's kind of a sort of a mentoring opportunity that I'm interested in taking advantage of, and bringing the process to other people's attention and making of the process a learning.
And we were definitely really attracted to that part of your process for sure. With AEIVA being a primarily contemporary museum in the Deep South in Birmingham, Alabama, like just by definition, like what we do is already sort of like a barrier to a lot of people. People see the building, they're intimidated, they feel like maybe they're not even allowed to go inside. And so the idea of anytime that we can sort of engage the community and let them actually like participate in the creation of the exhibitions and feel some sort of ownership and understand that this is free and that this is their museum and these are here for them, we love that. What's this piece? I can't remember where this one was.
So this one is called As Above, So Below, here in New York. Also made hand cut, handmade. I start from the plans of the gallery, elevation and floor plans, and I put together in my studio a small scale model using a foam board. And then what I do is cover the model with paper in this sort of dress that I can bring out and then back in, and make myself really small on the model as if I was standing there, and start drawing the shape that I want to create from this point of view, this angle. And then the process of translating what's in the model onto the walls is by standing in this point, using a laser pointer and drawing with the laser pointer onto the wall, and having my helpers or assistants be the extension of my arm, and asking them, make a dot here, make a dot here, make a dot here, make a dot here. And then getting all the dots kind of connected together with the adhesive vinyl.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. This was interesting because part of my practice, as you mentioned, has to do with bringing science into art. And by that time, I was reading about something called digital physics. And, in physics, when you think about the atoms, subatomic particles, then like, how can you connect that with the digital world? And then I was reading about digital physics, and these guys talk about the smallest element in matter to be information, and they call it the information. And that is a little bit close to the idea of the multiple dimensions, the 11th dimensions in matter that Brian Greene talks about as the what is the name of it? The Calabi shapes. So there's like this whole concept of geometry at a very, very small level. And it seems to be, according to the latest scientific studies, that it is vibrations. And then hence information, in the term that the vibration is either positive or negative. And then that becomes a binary relationship at the core of matter. So what I was trying to do was to bring the imagery of computer integrated circuits into a black hole, which is like, how are you going to connect those two things? Well, that's what I was trying to do there.
It's also one of the things that I love about your work is that, the density of sort of the thought and the conceptual themes and just what you're thinking about. It's so heavy, and we could spend an hour just talking about this one photo probably.
Yeah.
A lot of times artists that approach work in that way, like with that sort of conceptual like weight,
Mm-hmm.
they sort of tend to neglect the basic idea of like it also needs to look amazing as well. And so like your work is dense, but it's also like visually like very, very striking, and there's a really great balance between
Thank you.
While y'all continue to talk, John, I can show that video real quick, or a portion.
We're almost there.
Okay.
We're almost there. So this is So this is the project you did for AEIVA, and so this
Mhm.
piece was entitled "Facing the Hyperstructure." And so, just for a little comparison, that first slide we showed, you said took 3 weeks. This project took 14, and so we knew that this would be a really sort of heavy endeavor. And so what we did was we pitched this idea to the Department of Art and Art History that we would build an entire course around Jessica's project. And so we built a special topics class within the art department that was equal parts art history. So we would have weekly meetups where Jessica and I would present lectures and sort of like primarily Jessica, but contextualizing her work in an art historical context, but then also walking them through just the logistics of what it means to sort of embark on a project of this scale. We spent an entire year, Jessica and I, developing basically just the plan for how we were going to make this happen once she landed on the ground in Birmingham. And so walking them through that process all the way from the budget to the modeling, to the scale models. But then they, of course, then all had contact hours throughout the week where they actually helped Jessica make the piece itself. And so they're using box cutters, laser pointers to sort of draw on the wall. And it's all just commercial grade adhesive vinyl, which I won't talk about it too lot because I think Christina is going to talk to you about your process.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it would be really cool to show where this all started. And so this is the original 3-dimensional foam core maquette that you made, that you presented to us.
Mm-hmm.
So this piece, it's about like 3 feet in width, I think. This is now in our permanent collection, which is pretty cool. But you can see the top part opens up, and so it actually kind of extends. And so this was sort of the rough draft. This is what the project would be. And we had this a few months before you even got here, right? We kind of had a pretty good idea of what it was going to look like.
Correct. Oh, I have a little video of that maquette rotating. Can I show it?
Oh yeah, please.
All right. Let's share it real quick here.
Oh, here, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'll let you share.
All right, here I go. Do you see me here?
Yep.
Play. Yeah, so you were saying?
No, this is great. And now I'm just kind of hypnotized by this thing.
Yeah, I enjoy the little things in the process so much, and that's the reason why I make these things, just to somehow validate them and legitimize them and give them the credit it deserves. Because once the installation is up, it's for people to enjoy, but then it ends up in a pile of crumpled vinyl. Or same with the maquettes. If it wasn't to end up in the museum, then maybe I just fold it and put it in a drawer, right? So making these documentations is certainly part of an important part of my practice.
And from like a museum curator, administrative kind of position, like just having stuff like this is just so helpful in making the case for the university paying for something like this. Because at the time it was one of the probably more expensive exhibitions we'd ever attempted. But also sort of difficult to describe, like they're just like, oh, this we're gonna have this artist come and they're gonna like roll vinyl all over the walls. Like, that doesn't exactly get you a bunch of checks, but having these types of materials and being able to really like help people visualize what the project would look like really made all the difference.
True.
So one of the, here, I'm going to take the screen back over for just a second. Actually, you know what? I think now, Christina, would be a good time to show that video. So one of the coolest parts, too, about this process is while Jessica is sort of coordinating and laying out all this vinyl, she's moving around with a still camera for the entire duration. And so for 14 weeks, she shot what would eventually be edited into a time-lapse stop-motion animation. So we're going to play that. It's kind of long. It's about 5 minutes long, but it's very hypnotic, and I highly recommend that you watch it. So, Christina, if you'll put it, full screen.
And Christina, as you play it, what I'll do is share on the chat the link for people to maybe keep it if they want to see it later.
Yeah.
Christina, you have to share your computer audio with Zoom.
Oh, okay, hold on. Let me stop share for 1 second. I apologize, I forgot about that step.
There was a really kind of amazing audio component that went with the exhibition, and so that's what's playing on the video, and then we'll talk about that a little bit more later too.
Okay. Great, and I've turned down the sound fairly low.
That was the studio space. One of the galleries was my studio during the installation. It's a massive drawing.
It was a lot of fun to do, and by drawing, it's not an understatement, because you would stand at what you call the point of perspective and then use a laser pointer to, oops, I don't know what happened there, to draw on the wall while we put the little tabs on, which is something you kind of got a very quick glimpse of in there. And then we would put the vinyl on, and then you would either cut it out with an X-Acto knife, or we put more vinyl on, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Christina, let me have the screen and I'll show some photos while y'all talk about that. I've got some.
Mm-hmm. Also, the sound piece is so good. I was just really enjoying that.
John, had you shown the picture yet of the vinyl record?
Not yet.
Right. Not gotten to that one yet. So we're going to, do you want to talk about that real quick then? Since she just
I know, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
you have your order.
So that sound piece that was playing.
Yeah,
over
the sound
video.
piece.
Why don't you talk about that, Jessica? What that was all about?
Yeah, totally. I'm happy to talk about it. It was one of six pieces, six sound design pieces, 6 tracks created by Gilberto Castillo. He's Colombian. He's a sound designer that I've been working with for over 10 years now. I did my first installation with him. I think it was actually my first art installation ever of, this sort of theme. And I invited him. He went to a musical school in the same university I was going to. And we met. He was extremely good. He was just conservatory musician. And then he got tired of it and started making these interesting fusions between electronic music and classical music. So that's his background. And I really loved what he was doing. And we would kind of visit each other on the musical department and then back to the arts department. It was really great friendship that developed into many collaborations. So I decided to invite him, obviously. Again, we work in a really amazing way. He listens to my ideas. I listen to what he's working on. And then we take it from there and start, I work obviously from a visual perspective. I give him visual information, and then he translates the visual into sound. And he just responds so beautifully to everything that I do. I really love working with him. So it was an honor to be able to have him produce an entire album that we are planning to press on a vinyl that you guys will be able to find at AEIVA soon.
Yeah. And so, if you've ever been to AEIVA, you may or may not know that there are speakers that pipe throughout the entire building. And so during the run of the exhibition, we had sort of scheduled time slots where you could come see the piece with that piece of music playing, blasting throughout the entire building. It was actually quite cool.
Mm-hmm.
And can we you did it. Sorry, the Gilberto Castillo, the spelling of it. Sorry.
Yeah. And so we had meant to have this record out forever ago, but we've had some.
The sound is already there. It's just about pressing it, but it's this sort of latent beauty that it's just waiting there to be released, because he doesn't want anybody else to hear it until it goes out. It was just fantastic. I really, really enjoyed what he did. And he will continue working with me for the next project I'll be doing. So yeah, sound is this amazing filler of space, more when the work that I'm doing, it may be visually striking and say eye-popping, but then it leads to so many possibilities of entering and sort of appropriating the space in this dynamic way. And sound is just perfect. It's a really great match for my work.
And then so
And John, can you go
time-
back to the picture you were just on? We did a lot of programming with this as well, and then one of that was the AEIVA chamber music, which is something we do every semester, and they composed original scores based off of the artwork as well. So that was like another element to it, which was fun.
Yeah, that was also one of the more interesting parts of the project for me, is that once the piece was completed and unveiled to the public, we then invited artists from all different types of disciplines, musicians, other video and visual artists, and we invited them to come in and actually create their own artwork within the artwork and have it interact with Jessica's piece. We had projections, like we had all kinds of different performances that happened in the space, which I thought was really neat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and can I add to that?
Yeah.
So the 14 weeks were the process of making that you saw, but the museum was open. So everything that you saw happen on that time lapse was somehow a performance piece, because people could just come in and see the work. Museum full doors open, and that also allowed me to talk to people one-to-one as the process was taking place, and meet the community, meet the people working around the university, from different backgrounds in science or in music right across the street, and kind of trying to engage the community with the project through showing the process. And that was the best tool to engage these people into activating the space with these public programs. So, for example, we had a panel discussion with Christina Vischer and Abraham Marshalls. And it was amazing because I met them just because they were passers. They just came in, they wandered around, and I talked to them and I said, I'm putting together public programming. I think your ideas are pretty in line with this. Let's just integrate. So that was really great to be able to open the space in that way.
And having you, I don't know if this has already been mentioned, and I'm sorry if it has, but having you, AEIVA's smallest first gallery served as your studio the entire time. Mm-hmm. So anytime AEIVA was open to the public, people could come in and sort of invade your space and for better or worse, like interact with you and sort of ask you questions. And people still talk about you. Like,
oh, nice. It was really rich time. It was filled with so much energy, so much content. It was amazing.
Hey, John, if you stop sharing your screen, I can show her blog space while we talk about that.
I was going to show these really quick, and then I was going to stop and hand it over to you. So two nights out of the entire duration, Adam Sturmer and his team, who were hanging out around here, helped us set up this really sort of elaborate lighting rig. And so you could sort of, it added this sort of extra layer to the work. And then the Gilberto's score was playing during this part, and this served as the public reception for the piece. I think Christina has some of these photos as well. Mm-hmm. And then I just wanted to get to this before I hand it over. So this is actually the cover of the record. And so this is what the record will look like when that is released, hopefully when the world gets back to normal.
Correct.
Hey, Jessica, we had a question in the comments. Can you tell us anything about your next big installation?
Yes, I'd love to. So, Christina, do you want to share the video? Or
yeah, I will do that. Share computer sound, share.
Actually, the project that I'm doing that somehow comes from one of the people that I met as I was doing the installation at AEIVA. I was, talked to this one guy. His name is Jason Teutsch. He came so many times. He was so excited about the project. And he was interested in it because it had this techie vibe, and he was working with encryption and working with mathematics and computer science. So he felt really drawn to the work. And we had really interesting conversations about information and the internet and how information freely flows and what it means for artists to be in this sort of free open space, but in terms of how can artists monetize, they own their work, if it can just be completely reproduced all over the place. And he introduced me to the concept of blockchain. I already knew about it. It has to do with cryptocurrencies. But after that, I think it was like 6 months after I came back to New York after this installation, he reached out to me and hired me to put together a work that sort of expresses how blockchain works, and to use art to express and educate people around the idea of blockchain technology. So I started by opening this channel on Telegram. I don't know if you're familiar with social media. It's called Telegram, and there's forums and communities of people, and a lot of the blockchain space happens there. So I've been kind of leading, playing the role of moderator in this crypto space and art. Now, the big project that I'm working on is these images. It's under the Cambie Street Bridge. Can we take a look at the video real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so this is a 600 feet long pathway under a highway. Can you just stop it for a second there?
Yeah.
Pause it. Thank you. So what you see here are the columns. It has 11 columns. We have about 35,000 square feet of surface cover. And what this project is about is bridging. I decided I wanted to use the concept of bridge between art and technology. And so this is going to be installed using adhesive vinyl. But since this is a larger project, it will be totally impossible to do line by line in the way that you saw. So I'm doing a different technique this year, or with this project, that is working with an architect and an engineer. So the process starts from taking a scan, a cloud map survey. So engineers in civil works, like civil engineering works, like bridges, tunnels, large scale outdoors structures, they use this camera. It's a lens. It's a lens. A laser, I'm sorry. It's a laser that measures all the points 360 degree. And then it records the information of all the points and creates a map of all the points. It's a data map. And then we started from there. Then we moved all that data map with the architect who created a 3D model, which is the one that you're seeing there. And then I put together a scale model, the one that you saw in the photos before, and then the architects put it together and put it on the 3D model. So this is a total different approach in terms of production because it's so large. So if you want to continue going, and then I'm going to explain to you why I was talking about the blockchain community. But let me tell you about the technique. So just as we had at AEIVA a few points of view for the lines to kind of cross between the wall and the floor in a continuous way, we're going to have 10 points throughout the underpass. And this is the way that we're working the geometry in order for it to work from that point. It's by projecting digitally the image. So what you see here is the process of projection over the 3D model. And then from this 3D model, we are generating the sheets of vinyl. So we won't be really drawing. This will be more of an installation of large sheets of already printed vinyl. So it is under the Cambie Street in Vancouver. We are starting installation in July. And since I started working with the blockchain community, I joined the Foundation of Art and Blockchain board, and we will be sort of supporting a group of artists to take over the space, sort of in the same way that we did with the AEIVA, bringing Gilberto Castillo, bringing the musicians, bringing the students to do video projections. This is going to be by open call, and we're going to be doing AR on the columns and just bringing technology into it. But it's mostly directed to the art and blockchain community. So it's a very vibrant community, and if anybody here listening is interested in exploring how to monetize or sell their digital art, blockchain platforms are the way to go. So just you can reach out to me. I'm gonna write my email here, and I'm happy to guide you through, because it's exploding. And it's a great opportunity for digital artists. So this new project, it's installation, but it's at the same time creating a platform for the digital art to be showcased in the public realm.
So what led you to do, what brought you into large scale installations as opposed to any other art form?
That's interesting. So I come from a traditional drawing, painting background. I was working with collage, using like books. As you heard from John, I have all this sort of information that I want to introduce into the art. It mostly comes from books, and the concept of information is at the core of my work. And just thinking about how information shapes the way that we perceive reality. So the written text it's just the only element that I could think of that can represent how information is sort of stamped. And so I started using a lot of text, and then I ended up using text that was computer-based just to be sort of realistic with the kind of information in my time. And that's the reason why I ended up doing things that are more digital looking, is because information now runs on digital platforms. So part of the process of how I move from one project to another is by doing this sort of like zoom in into the work. Like I say, I have this drawing, and then I zoom in, and then I end up like just looking at this, and then I zoom in, and then I end up with this block, and then I zoom in, I end up with the line. It's literally a zoom in process, like if I am in a I don't know, with a device that takes me deep. So as I was going into my 2D work, I reached a level where I was like in sort of like an empty space. And then that's how I ended up doing things in space. It's kind of weird. So I only had text kind of floating in the space as I went in. So I started just like placing text in walls, and just, it's like diving into the space. That's how I got into representing the digital space, as if you were able to dive into it. It's just because that's the way that I kind of moved from one project to another. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense because of the way that you were talking about your project while you were here. So we had a really interesting, you do a lot of research. When you came, you had a lot of research that you talked about with space and such from your previous project in the 2013, 2014, the as above, as below, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then when we got to our panel discussion, which I was slowly trying to scroll up to, we talked about the concept of space and how it influenced
Mm-hmm.
the installation and the naming of it facing
Mm-hmm.
the hyperstructure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or we can?
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, so as you see here, we have this dichotomy, which is the physical space and the virtual space, the digital and the real, what we consider the real. And we see them as these opposites, right? You see the building and you can knock on it and it sounds, right? But then you think about what is that other space that is there? you think about our computers right now. We are in this sort of space that it is pretty there. It is a space. We're sharing a space. When space is not physical, like the one that we're sharing right now here, it's a little bit harder to describe. It feels like it may be different than the physical, but in reality, it really is not. The space that we're feeling together collectively through this meeting right now could be taking place inside a room in just like the old school way. It would be at the museum, right? If it wasn't because this is happening. So this is a good example to show how space is sort of inhabited by the dynamics between us. And that in itself is also a space. It's a virtual space. But virtuality is not necessarily connected to the computers as we believe. Think about before computers existed, when you were reading books and you go to the footnote, you are already connecting to another writer, and there's a whole network of knowledge that occupies this virtual space, that it's not physical. At the same time, that virtual space somehow creates the physical space. So I would just give an example, the AEIVA building. It is physical, we can touch it, it has shapes, height, and it was created in a meeting with people. It was created through an idea, it was created through drawing. So there was this whole other construction, virtual construction that happened prior to the construction of the building. So when I talk about the hyperstructure, I talk about hyperstructure generally talks about layers, the hyper metadata of layers of information. So the hyperstructure it's a concept that has to do with multiple dimensions, right? Mostly with space, with physical space. But I want to think of it about it as a many layers that you can find that are all interconnected, whether physical or virtual, that connect everything. And one does not mean that it's opposite to the other. They're intertwined. They're one. So when you're facing the hyperstructure, you're just like that title is just trying to convey the idea that we are in front of all this information, that it's entangled into this one big hyperstructure.
And I keep using this concept when there was a question earlier about it, how long was it up and how is it still up? Yes, part of it is still up. The ceiling, the upstairs is all still there. It is coming down slowly. The walls were still up until in the lobby and such until recently. So we we would have groups come in, particularly at K through 12, and we would talk about perspective from an artist standpoint, mm-hmm. and then from a perspective with the 3D glasses, because even though the light show is what really enhanced the 3D, those 3D glasses, you can still, the installation is still three-dimensional to an mm-hmm. extent, just in the daylight. And so we talk about perspective through, and then I have different types of 3D glasses that we look at and talk about kind of the science behind it. And then we talk about, well, what is perspective? Well, you have perspective of the space, and then you also have perspective of the knowledge, because all of these conduits and such, you guys were in your classes and such, we're talking about the transmission of knowledge. And then mm-hmm. this was also, you changed the design based off, because if you guys looked at the maquette earlier, which I think there's a picture of it coming up, there's Nellie, there's the parrot. They started, oh my gosh. So they, you changed the design based off y'all's conversations.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. I like what you're saying, like just to think about the concept, the idea of perception, perspective, just the word perception or perspective, it comes from the same root. It comes from your perception. You are in this point. And perspective itself, who's the artist, the writer, Douglas Hofstadter. I quoted him several times in our classes. He talks about how we perceive the world, and that's why I'm interested in information, is when we're born, our brains are, say, empty, and then we start making associations, and we start seeing and understanding even three-dimensional space, how we perceive that there is a floor and that there is a wall, and from the distance to be able to recognize it. That is a whole process of filling your brain with those associations that later on will tell you that that's a floor and that's a wall. But if you think about how is it that you perceived, what was your perspective before you had all those set of codes in your brain, it would probably not be as it is as you perceive it. So that's why information is not just, oh, a bunch of documents recorded. No, information is absolutely everything that is in front of us. And since I'm an artist, well, visual information is what I'm focusing on. And visual information are cues that lead you to see the way that you see, that you think you see. You think that the things you see are like that per se, and that you perceive them because they are that, but it's not really that. You see them like that because you have been trained to see them that way. Mm-hmm. But if you are not, you would not see them the same.
Yeah, I actually, that last part about challenging kind of your perception of things, we actually do that a lot with our tours and our galleries and such. And then pulling from the collection and all of those things. Well, we only have about 4 or 5 minutes left, which I can't believe we're already at our end of time. Are there any other questions? I will, while we're doing this, let's see, we've done that one. I will quickly kind of go through a couple of the lights, because I think that was one that John had not shown earlier. So are there any questions?
Somebody here was saying that the intertwined meta structure of knowledge, whether it is physical or virtual, someone saying like fractals. And I really like that sort of approach, even though fractals kind of, as we perceive them, are in this sort of one layer. You just go down, in, and then you find the same, almost as if you were going up and you would be finding the same, which is great. But I like to think about these other layers that are not just necessarily going in or out. It's just like around and towards all directions and towards all realms. It's really interesting to really see how everything is totally connected. I guess, yeah, that would be fractals. But fractals tend to, in the common sort of a culture of, I don't know if it's like gaming culture or where it comes from, maybe science, but the hyperstructure has a little more depth, I would say, more depth than fractals, because it encompasses our relationships, our feelings, our dreams, the 1 terabyte in our computer. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are there
what I was thinking?
Are there any other questions?
Hey, Jessica.
Yes.
Is there anything else worth talking about with your work, as far as like the ephemeral quality of it? One of the most interesting things for me was throughout the duration of us creating the piece, and people would come in and be like, well, how long is it going to be up? And I would tell them, well, probably just like a couple of months. And it always blew people's minds that we would put 14 weeks into creating something that would then get sort of scraped up and thrown in the dumpster. And so like, I always think that artists that work in that way and create those types of works, like that's a very sort of interesting and specific idea in itself.
So I think just the process in itself is an art too, on one end. So it's not just the final product that has validation, which is the process itself. So those 14 weeks are also the work. And secondly, people ask me if I feel bad about the work coming down, and I think it's totally fine. I think that's the reason why documenting it properly is key. But I'm not emotionally attached to the final result as I am emotionally attached to the process. Yeah.
Is that why it's so important for you to is that part of the reason why it's important for people to have access to us to you making the piece?
Exactly. It is important for people to have access of me making the piece. If that is not possible in the way that we did it, the museum was open, I just make sure that everything that gets documented. So when the final result is up, there is this window to the process for people to really understand what went behind it. That's the reason why I like to talk about the work so much, because it really brings a different context for the work besides just, the experience of it.
I want to jump in and say that I loved working on this. And that I love the installation, and I really hate that we're taking all of it down now, but you can ask anyone. They I complain about it all the time that it's coming down, but
it was taking out slowly, so it's probably not going to be as shocking.
Right, yeah. We still have the ceiling. This wall right here is still up, the moving wall. But with that, I have a lot of nostalgia for the install, so I wanted to show this one video before we kind of conclude here.
I don't know.
This is the day we were testing out the system.
I think this is the day. Yeah, I think this was the first.
It was making a sound.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Nothing really.
I had anxiety.
It went all the way 45 feet, you know?
It went all the way up, yeah. All the way up to the window.
No, when you got up to where we got up to where you could actually see out of that window, and you could see Norwood from AEIVA. It took years off my life. That was awful.
I had a lot of fun with it. I really did. So
Me too.
I'm
you did the majority of it.
Huh?
Which is why you did the majority of it.
You did a lot.
Yes, I was the main person in the scissor lift with you. When you saw two people in there, it was usually me. So I'm going to stop the screen share, and then I'm going to thank everyone who participated and helped with this. Jessica, thank you so much for helping us and for providing us with these coloring sheets. I didn't get too far, but if you guys would love to, I would love it if you would turn on your video if you've been participating with us, and hold up your drawing or your coloring for us.
Let's see. Oh, I like those. Woo! Kelly, that's beautiful. Joanna, nice. Thank you. Beautiful.
Great. Thank you, guys. And Jessica put her email in there if any of you were interested in partnering or had further questions. Yeah, John, go ahead.
One thing, Christina, too, if it looks like a lot of people didn't have time to actually finish. So when you finish, if you want to take a photograph of that and get those to us, how do they do that?
You can put it on Instagram, tag us at AEIVA UAB, and then also on our Facebook. And I saw Tina unmuted, so I'm going to let her take over there.
I was going to say, I will reshare it to AEIVA if you tag us, and then you probably can submit it into the, if you're not an Instagrammer, you can put it on the Facebook event and we can screenshot it to share it.
And our plan is to do this every Thursday night for the foreseeable future, and we will have a different guest artist every single time, and we would love to have you all back.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm about to end the meeting, so thank you. Check Facebook for the upcoming next week, Amanda Browder, same time, different Zoom link, so don't reuse that Zoom link. You will need to still sign up through the Google Sheet to get your Zoom link, but we will hopefully see you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jessica.
Bye.